Everyone that we revere in the planet today, Larry Page, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Jean-Paul Dujourier, Bill Gates, Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, any of these people didn't stick to their lane. You know, we're in great rooms. The room is a room of failures and non-settlers and people that are aggravated for more. We failed at something, but we want more. How do we get it? And that can be summed up in that curiosity. Life, society is trying to put me in a lane that I don't belong. I'm hoping that they get to the end of this and they go, okay, I've got permission to think bigger, go for big and go for stupid. I want to see that big fat smile on your face when you suddenly start looking at your business and go, right, how can I get some stupid goals out of this?
I love the way you start off by saying go for stupid. And I'd really like you to do two things. Give us a little insight into where this new book's from, and then any of your backstory that you think is fun to share for the readers and for the listeners out there.
All right. So let me answer the first question first. Where did the book come from? Aggravation. I was pissed off. COVID came along and I got absolutely violent, basically. I couldn't believe that as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we're going at 200 miles an hour, aren't we? And we're constantly making more money, more impact. But what's the one thing that we can't make more of? Time. Now, COVID came across, and all of a sudden, everyone that I couldn't get hold of because of business meetings, travel, weren't doing that anymore. So I was able to get hold of those people. I wasn't having to fly across the other side of the planet to do what I did as a job. So all of a sudden, I was given a 9-day week. And very quickly on, I was like, Jesus, this is great. You know, I get up and no matter who I want to contact, I can get them. I haven't got to go through a secretary because they ain't at work anymore. So I was loving this. And I'm looking on social feeds and things like that, where I do a lot of, content myself. And I'm seeing these pricks going, hey, I've just finished The Sopranos. What else can I binge watch? How else can I waste my life? I'm like, you're fucking kidding, And everyone's out there going, oh my God, I can't connect with people anymore. I can't go to the gym. And your fat ass wasn't going to the gym before COVID. So all of a sudden, it became this period of excuses. And everyone's going, I can't connect. We could connect we couldn't hug, we couldn't smell, but we could still phone people. We could still Zoom people. We could still connect and have a conversation with people. You were just deciding not to. So the book came from me I'm not the most subtle person, you know that. And I started doing these memes and I started making comments and I started calling people out. And people were like, dude, you got to do a blog or something. And the blog turned into what was the book. So it was really a way of us being able to understand how we're communicating, how we're doing it badly, how media is not using us, but it's a low-hanging fruit as a blame tool. And it went through all of these things. I went through some stories of me and I contacted some famous friends of mine. And then I went back into history about how we are quick to use what's happened to us as an excuse rather than a benefit. And we both know the late but always great Sean Stevenson, who always used to say, was this done for me or was this done to me? And COVID came across, and thanks to Sean, I was able to go, okay, was this done to me or for me? Hell yeah, this was done for me. And I couldn't understand that. So I wrote the book out of aggravation to get people to realign how they do things. Now, the title, Go for Stupid. It's old. I owned a concierge firm, and I've always believed if anyone Googles me, they'll find out that for 25 years, I was the most connected person on the planet you'd never heard of. Worked with Elon Musk, Elton John, Andrea Bocelli, the Vatican. I got up to some great shits and giggles and was well known within that sandpit. But I always said I was not in the business I was in. Everyone always thought I was a concierge to the most powerful people in the world. That was what I needed to do in order to be able to have a 2-hour conversation with them and go, hey, how do you look at relationships? How do you like podcasts? I reckon if we'd had a podcast in the 90s, I'd have probably just done that. But I wanted to have conversations with rich and powerful people, not famous. I'm not about the people that bankroll these people. I'm not about people that own things like countries. I wanted to have a conversation with them and go, so how do you look at relationships? How do you look at investment? How do you value your time? How do you look at culture? I wanted to have those conversations. Hey, if I've got to get you a drum lesson with Guns N' Roses or close down a museum in Florence and set up a table of 6 at the feet of Michelangelo's David and then have Andrea Bocelli to come in and serenade you while you're munching your meatballs, hey, I'll do that. But I wanted to have the conversation. So that's what I did for 25 years. But people would say to me, hey, I want to get great front row seats at Elton John's concert. We would literally sit around our table, which at the time was in Palm Beach, and we'd go, okay, we got a guy wants 2 tickets to front row Elton John's concert. How can we make that stupid? I've got a client that wants to, meet the rock band Journey. How can we make that request stupid? I know someone who wants to do something with Formula One. How can we do something stupid? Now, here's the dumb thing, and it's happening with you now. If I say to you, hey, we're going to go for the impossible, do you know you've got to rewind this video and watch your face? Because when I said stupid, and it's just happened again, you smile.
Right.
Because all of a sudden your childlike reflexes come out in your head and you're like, oh, stupid. We're going to have fun with this. But the second I said impossible, your lips actually went, you tightened. Because it's like saying, hey, I'm going to go for that brick wall. You've given yourself an excuse. So we wanted to take that word out of our vocabulary. So we replaced it. And I worked with Elon Musk 5-6 years ago. And he always turned around and said they will always laugh at you just before they applaud. And so I realized that for all of the most amazing things I've done, getting people married in the Vatican, setting you up for a visit of Formula One Ferrari and Maranello, the Florence dinner, all of these wonderful, amazing cocktail story things that I did, I'd done them because I'd started at a point of how can I take an initial request and go stupid. And now I do that when I'm coaching. When I'm coaching, I'm training people, I look at your business goals, I look at your relationships, and I go, okay, how can we make this stupid? How can we achieve something ridiculous here? And that's where the name came from.
I love it. Well, what I love is that, in the book, as well as just knowing your story, hearing you speak a couple of times, you have always been that entrepreneur mindset where you were monitoring trends. You were studying interaction, whether you were the bouncer at a bar, picking the brains of every single person as they walked in. And ultimately, you weren't focusing on just that individual. You were focusing on the experience, on the entire experience of the bar, on the entire experience of the staff, on the way people walked in and how they felt. And when you start to think bigger like that and work your way backwards, anything is possible. And I definitely smile when you say stupid, because at the end of the day, I think that people that think super big have to break down those barriers in the end anyway, because we're kind of brought up in this world where we're in a box. I mean, I always say I didn't know that I could be anything other than a teacher or a police officer growing up. I mean, that was my brain was like, I'm going to be a police officer or a teacher. And I started to see entrepreneurism and other things. And all of a sudden the brain starts opening up, and you cracked impossible so many times that it became something that sounds stupid. But I'm applauding as I listen to the story. I love it. And I love the Elon Musk story too. So, I'll just pause there and see what thoughts you have before I ask another question.
No, I think you're right on. I think society also dictates the parameters of what we think is achievable. And like, how many times do you hear this line? Stick to your lane, know your place, grow up, all of these like parameters. Well, everyone that we revere in the planet today, Larry Page, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Jean-Paul Dujouria, Bill Gates, Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, any of these people didn't stick to their lane. And that's the focus point there. That's the mic drop.
And they're super curious. I mean, everything that you have written about and succeeded about came from my outside looking in and studying just to be prepared to have a great conversation with someone with high energy and has accomplished so much. But it's curiosity. It drives the interest to see where you could take something, how you could experience something for someone. And talk a little bit about curiosity for me.
Curiosity was one of those things that, funny enough, as I got to, and here's the dumb thing. You know, you've met me. Okay, so I'm 245 pounds of ugly, and it's as simple as that. So in the early days, I didn't have money, and I wanted to speak to rich people. So I literally used to walk up to rich people and go, "Hey, how come you're rich and I'm not?" And that confrontation didn't lead to the best scintillating conversations or answers. So I realized very early on, I'm a quick learner. I realized if you don't like the answer, change the question. And so then I thought, well, hang on a minute. No one's answering this question. So then I changed the question and like, hey, how come you're wealthy and I'm not? And then they would talk about they found their wife. They have a family, and family means so much to them. And they found God. And that all makes sense. But I ain't going to marry your wife and join your church. So how does that help me? I wasn't getting tactics. So then I changed the question again to how come you're successful and I'm not? And that was the key. They actually started answering. So I knew I had to change the question, change the way I was asking. And one of the answers I always got was, I'm curious. And it was a very, very early on. And like, we're in great rooms, you know, Genius Network, people like that, you know, we're in great rooms. The room is a room of failures and non-settlers and people that are aggravated for more. That's a beautiful cocktail. You know, we failed at something, but we want more. How do we get it? And that can be summed up in that curiosity. We want to know how to do it. How do you do it? How does that work? This happened to me. Did it happen for me or to me? That curiosity is one of those childlike things that will allow you to play big. And again, the key word play, just like Steve Jobs does. I love that it does this, but I want it to fit in a pretty little box, you know, and people like Elon Musk. I want to go into space. I'm going into space. Now, how do I make that happen? You know, you've got to start off with that childlike curiosity and then just go, okay, why does that button work? And how come that does? And if I take the back off of my remote control, what does it look like? Now, we're obviously reprimanded by our mums because we can't work the bloody remote control anymore, but we know. And that curiosity should never, ever be satisfied. It should be constant. And as soon as you know how to repair that remote control again, build a rocket.
It's amazing. When you're going through this process and you're teaching other people, because now you're coaching, you're speaking, you're building big audiences and sharing some of your experiences. What are some of the basics that you start with foundationally? If I'm somebody listening out there that's never done this before, what are the basics? Where do they start?
All right, first of all, you got to start at your breakfast table. You see, the downside today, and you know, call me out, Scott. Tell me if I'm wrong here. All right. Have you ever in your life, not in an entrepreneur environment, but in the pub, in the bar, in a coffee table, at a breakfast table with your family on Thanksgiving, started to talk about your goals and aspirations, started to talk about your business ideas and how you're going to scale this and probably sell that off. And then this piece will go on to be a $20 million. And you've started to talk about it. And then you've looked around at the room and they've glazed over like you've gone mad. And then you have to turn around and go, please excuse me, someone must have spiked my coffee. And we dull down our dreams and aspirations. Does that ever happen to you?
It happens all the time. All the time. You are speaking to the audience that's giving you an amen and an hell yeah at the same time. Yes, 100%.
Exactly. So we've all sat in rooms where normal folk diss our dreams, and we're faced with two opportunities. One, leave that table and find a new table. Or two, dull down your dreams and hide your visions. Now, sadly, we've known these people. They're members of our family. We grew up with them. They work with me. You know, just because they're in your world and sucking the same air doesn't mean they share the same vision as you, the same culture, the same drive, the same curiosity. So the first thing I did when I was growing up was I was rolling around with a bunch of bikers in East London, and I realized they're all broke. And therefore, I am a cog of this wheel. We're all broke bikers. I need to change the room I'm in. And do you know the funny thing is, probably about 30 strong of us in that bar. One of those guys I still keep in contact with. Just one. It's a very, very tough thing, but you've got to change the room you're in. If it's your family, hey, understand they don't share the same vision as me. I'm not going to share it. I'm not going to show up as that. Hey, I'll show up as Scott. Hey, you know, happy Thanksgiving, pat on the back. Good.
Right.
See you next year. That's fine. But when you're in day-to-day life, you've got to change the room. I'll tell you a true story. You know Jay Abraham, don't you?
Yes.
Right. So Jay's my boy. He's just down the road from me here. So he's a neighbor. Very fortunate for that. I had this brilliant idea of a business. It was amazing. First time in my life, I did a PowerPoint presentation. I had slides, graphs. It was attractive. And I phoned up Jay and I'm like, Jay, I got to come down. You're going to love this deal. It's going to make us a few million within like a month, 2 months. It's solid gold. And he went, come down. So I came down there. We cracked open some whiskey and I went through this presentation with Jay on this amazing concept of my business. And at the end of it, I looked at Jay and I went, well, what do you think? And he looked at me and he scratched his beard and he went, do you know, I was expecting more. And I'm like, shit, what do you mean? He's like, well, you know, with your credibility, your enthusiasm, your connections, your drive. Is that it? And I thought, shit, I've gone too low. And that's the kind of room you need.
Yep.
You need to be in a room where you say to people, hey, I'm going to do this. And someone says, great. Have you thought about that? I have not. Thank you. Challenges are not negative. Challenges get you refined. They sharpen up the blade before you get in the bar fight. You need to make sure you surround yourself with challenges and people that support your goals and ambitions. And so quite simply, the first thing you got to ask yourself is, does your circle challenge and support at the same time? Or do they jeer and diss and laugh? Now, most people laugh because bearing in mind, 85% of the planet work for the 15%.
Right.
Okay. So the masses are out there to get a paycheck and laugh at your goals and aspirations. Are the people in your room supporting or jeering? So the first thing you got to do is change the room you're in.
Yeah, that's huge. It's funny how people also, when you go learn to swim, you could swim in a pool. Most children learn to swim in a pool. And that same pool aspect can be applied if they go into a pond or a lake, or better yet, the biggest body of water, the ocean. Once you know how to swim, you could swim anywhere. And so when you apply the same logic and that pool gets bigger and bigger, well, as you do more and more, your circle gets bigger and bigger. You have named some of the biggest people in circles. I mean, Elon Musk at the Vatican, weddings at the Vatican. I mean, I've enjoyed just reading about some of the stories. Is there something that you've done that stands out to you as something you would have actually created or curated for yourself? Something that was just, if you had not thought of it, but you wish you had for yourself?
No. And I can be very quick with that because, again, two things. One, I'm very dull and boring. Okay. Now, you mentioned something before that we've been to events together and you've seen me at the end of the bar. How many times will you see me alone in the corner at a table at the end of the bar? Because, you know, we go to these events and, hey, we turn it up a little bit to be at the event. But 9 times out of 10, I just want to be left alone with my dogs. You know, I want to walk with my wife. I don't want a lot. And so I never wanted to sit front row at the Paris Fashion Week, or go through the back doors of the Vatican, or, drive a Formula One. I never wanted to do all of these things that I've been fortunate to do. I've wanted to have the conversation. I wanted to have the education. I wanted to have the challenge. Hey, I'm not going to lie to you. Being able to do those things, I come out and I'm like, cool, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I just came out after hanging out with Elton John. I can't believe I just walked out of SpaceX with Elon Musk. I will kind of get that euphoria, but it's nothing I ever wanted or planned. And now that I don't do that, I don't miss it. My goal was always to challenge that broke-ass biker from just outside of London. How can he be the kind of person that can support his family, support his mission, support his goals, focus? And to be honest with you, we mentioned some fantastic people. The fact that I can phone up Jay Abraham and have a conversation, the fact that I can speak to Roland Frazier, the fact that I can call these people friends, that's the real good stuff. Now, there's been some rooms I've been in, and I've been like, actually, this is a true story. When we did, a client asked me that he wanted to have a brilliant dining experience in Florence, and this, and I took over the Accademia de Galleria, shoved a table of 6 at the feet of Michelangelo's David at 9 o'clock at night. That's where he had dinner. Halfway through his pasta, I brought in Andrea Bocelli to serenade him. That was brilliant, cost a lot of money, was a wow experience. I pulled it off. But before the guy turned up, there was me, Veronica, and Andrea Bocelli hanging out in the Accademia. Pretty cool thing. And I'm sat next to Andrea Bocelli, and we're just chatting. And he speaks English. He doesn't speak a lot of English. Veronica is very fluent. We're having a chat. And all of a sudden, that moment where everything's ready to go, and you can just relax a little bit before the doors open? When I got that moment, and all of a sudden I'm looking up at the profile of David, I own the entire museum for those 5 hours, and I'm shoulder to shoulder with one of the most famous maestros ever in the planet. And literally my body just became a cold sweat, and I shivered. I was like, whoa, they all say, like, oh, someone stepped on you. I literally just shivered. And Andrea felt it because we were shoulder to shoulder. And he said something to Veronica in Italian. She said, are you okay? And I said, I've been so fast at pulling this off, making sure it worked. I never got that moment of realization where I am. And I'm now realizing who I'm sat next to. I'm not even in my country.
Right.
And my ability to go beyond the what's acceptable and achievable has been an entire museum in a foreign language. And I just suddenly got this cold sweat. So every now and then I do shudder and think to myself, how the hell did I get in this room? And I think that versus the complacency of, well, I deserve to be. Of course I did it. I think that's the difference as to whether or not I enjoy it, or as to whether it kind of like controls me.
Yeah, it's humility. I mean, ultimately, you were humbled in that moment, looking around, knowing the work it took to get there, feeling like you earned it. I could tell you, I sat on I guess the right side of the stage where Andrea Bocelli enters and exits on a stage, and he sings a song and then he comes off. And I brought at the time, it's probably 10-year-old son who loves Andrea Bocelli, and I bring him to the concert, and just the crowd, the feeling of being in the presence of how he performs, and how everyone else, to your point as well, every other singer sounds 10 times better when they're around him. It's like they've leveled up their game. And I noticed that sitting in there. My son and I walked back that night in the streets of Washington, D.C. And both of us were like, I mean, if we could have been skipping, and like, it was just such a surreal moment. I can only imagine how that feels in such a beautiful location with the experience of actually connecting with that human and his family. And wasn't his son also a part of it as well?
Yeah, his son was on the piano. Here's a little funny thing, because, I'm also an idiot and I like to just have fun with shit. So while we were actually sat on the plinth looking at David, Andrea is just kind of like warbling up his tonsils, and he's sitting there and he's like going, whoa, 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 whoa. And he's just, and even that sounded good coming from him. So as he did it, and Veronica was just checking her phone, I sat next to him and I just went, whoa, 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 whoa. And he stopped. And he looked over to Veronica and he said something to her in Italian. And she looked at him and she went, Steve, what are you doing? And I said, actually, Veronica, I'm having a duet with Andrea Bocelli. I said, when was there ever going to be the chance that this would ever happen? And she laughed and told Andrea, and Andrea giggled and looked towards me, put his hand on my knee, went, stop. So that was it. But hey, I did it. I did a 10-second duet with Andrea Bocelli, and that's what matters.
That's awesome. Okay, so you have mentioned expanding your circle. We've talked about curiosity. What are some of the other things that if I'm reading this book, or I want to go get this book, I'm sorry, what is it that I'm looking to get out of the experience? Your readers are amazing when they can apply things, but what is the one thing that everybody should look for when they finish reading this book?
Wow. Okay. The one thing, narrowing it down into that.
Well, I had to ask a better question because I read your book and I actually know and caught myself telling you and thinking through the question. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? He's waiting for me to ask the damn question, and the question needs to be succinct. And this is what I'm getting at. But see, I think out loud. So sometimes it's really difficult to get to that point until you get there. So the one thing, it doesn't have to be the one thing. It could be one thing in general, but what's one thing you hope that they get?
Permission. I think I would like the end of the book where they go, hang on a minute, that numbnuts from East London pulled it off. I'm already out of excuses. Hang on, the media, my friends, my so-called friends, my circle, life, society is trying to put me in a lane that I don't belong. I'm hoping that they get to the end of this and they go, okay, I've got permission to think bigger, go for big and go for stupid. I want to see that big fat smile on your face when you suddenly start looking at your business and go, right, how can I get some stupid goals out of this? That is called Go for Stupid, the art of achieving ridiculous goals for that reason. So I think if I was going to narrow it down into one element that you took away from that book, it would be permission to go for bigger goals.
I love it. What I love when I read anything that you've done is that it reminds me as a father how important it is to apply this thought process when we're raising our children. I have two sons, they're 16 and 13. I think you have 3 children.
Yeah.
And when you look at how we raise our kids, just the ability for them to think beyond what is possible or beyond what's probable, because a lot of times people stay in the probable and not past that. And so I kept finding myself going, hey, how amazing is it? You're breaking down all these ideas for people that weren't given permission to think bigger. What about the things that a child or a human can accomplish when they start that way, when they're not given those boundaries, where they're given more open lanes to be creative? How are you doing that with your children?
So I involved them in as much as I can. In fact, the last Genius Network event, you may have actually seen my son at it. And I will take my kids to any event I can. And even if I'm doing a business call, and this was a thing that I did years ago in the car, as I was driving my kids to school, I had a business meeting. It started off as a mistake. You don't want to answer a business call in the car with your kids. But I thought, why not? And I'm always playing that why not game. So I went, all right, shh, listen to daddy for a second. And I did the meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, I hung up and I went, do you think he likes me? Do you think he's going to say yes? Do you think I got that? What didn't he like about the conversation? And I tried to simplify it, but I got them involved. And of course the kids are like, yeah, daddy loves you. And he's like, well, he sounded funny then. And at the end of it, he didn't sound as if he wanted to, make another meeting, and just introduce them to, and then from that, I used to actually go, oh, I've got a meeting. Would you like to come in and sit on it? And they would sit in on the meeting. And then I would go to an event and I would take the kids with me. And of course, I host speakeasy events now. And my kids actually manage the events.
That's
So that's
awesome.
surrounded with Jason Fladlin, Candice Nelson, Barbara Lazaroff, Joe Polish, all of these people. And you're right. Can you imagine what we could have done at 13, 16, 17, 20 with that kind of room? We've had to wait until we're in our 30s and 40s to be able to spank the money out to join these clubs,
Right.
to be able to get that benefit. You don't have a idea. You have an obligation to funnel that through you and into your kids, because every father has one goal: to make their kids better than them. Simple as that. You know what? I don't ever want to be I don't want to be smart to my kids.
Nope.
I'm not now. But I try to funnel everything through to them so they can have conversations. And before I was on the phone with you, I was having a McDonald's breakfast. I'm chatting about cryptocurrencies and NFTs with my 17-year-old. And we're talking about what's creating the movement. And is it isolated just to the NFT market? And what's behind the NFT? Is that bad on blockchain or is it bad on NFT? And we're able to have these conversations because we've had people like Dan Fleischman and Nick Peterson actually at my events where these kids have actually conversed with these experts.
Isn't that great? So,
Yeah.
so you think back of how come I'm not successful like you? And now at 17, your son and you are having a conversation about the cutting edge of money.
Yes.
Not even the beginning parts. It's the next level conversations, Web3 and crypto and NFTs and all this stuff that, we wouldn't have known about until we joined some of these groups and started hanging out with people that were all into those areas. So I love that. That's really good. I try to do the exact same things with our kids, and sometimes the opposite occurs. The truth is sometimes they shut down because, they're so used to hearing the anything can happen. We could do it. Or have you thought of all levels? Have you asked the question? I just went to my seventh grader goes to Catholic school, and I do their auction every year. If you've ever been a stand-up comedian in the absolute worst bar ever, where they throw tomatoes at you, that would be a little better than hosting the Catholic school auction. All right. But at the end of the day, I do it because it raised a lot of money for the kids and a lot of money for financial aid. And my son, who never wants me to ask for anything, says, "Hey, Dad, maybe you could find out if Mr. Goldberg, our principal, could get the World Cup game, the U.S. Wales game on during school so we could all watch it." And so I get the mic and I'm standing in front of all the parents and everybody's dressed up and liquored up. And I said, "Look, I have an announcement first, straight from my kid, Mr. Goldberg." And the lights come on and long story short, at 2:00, the whole school was sitting together watching that World Cup game the other day. Again, he didn't want me to ask, but he kind of did. And because we did, something special happened. And a lot of those kids, that might be the first experience they ever had watching their country and something, or maybe it was their first soccer experience. But for my kid, it was showing you that if you don't ask, it doesn't ever happen. So,
Yeah.
Super.
Exactly. And for him, yes, he probably enjoyed the game, but he got a much bigger lesson out of it. And I'm sure in 5 years' time, he's always going to remember the ask over the game.
Yeah. And I was actually surprised. I went to Catholic school. I was shocked it happened. So I thought it was more of an impossible, but nuns were there when I was there, and it would have been impossible back then unless Notre Dame or the Philadelphia Eagles were playing. They were the only times, because they were all from Philly. So anyway, you are a connoisseur of good bourbons, mainly of old fashions, right? That's your drink of choice. Is there a particular place where you consistently have had the best old fashioned?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I was really worried about that question. But
I give you softballs every once in a while, but you know what? Whiskey is big right now, and it's something that people care about.
So I can give you that exact answer. My garden. You know, I just love to just do my old fashioned. Sometimes I'll smoke it. Sometimes I won't.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll burn the orange and I'll just sit there in my garden with my wife. Dogs are running around the garden. That's the best place. You see, and I forget his name, and I'm so sorry I did, but there's the Wizard Academy in Austin on whiskey. And
Really?
I actually interviewed that cat on my podcast. And he often says, he said he's always asked two questions. What's the best whiskey and what's the best glass to drink from? And he said the answers are very simple. The best glass is the one that's clean and closest to you. And the best whiskey is the one that you're drinking with your mates.
Yep.
Now, I've drunk some Pappy and I've gone, and then I've drunken like a $12, off the shelf of a drive-through with my mates in the back of the garden. And it's the best whiskey that night because it's full of smiles. So when you say connoisseur, I would say more of a consumer.
Yes.
I consume a lot of it. I wouldn't say a connoisseur, but I do consume enough to know that the best whiskey in the planet is the one we're sharing with friends.
That's awesome. Now, do you have a go-to though? Is there something that you always have in stock?
So there's two. I have Japanese whiskeys. Hibiki is it's one of the only whiskeys I can actually drink straight. I love doing cocktails, whiskey sours, penicillins, samurai swords, but my go-to is always the classic bullet bourbon in an old fashioned.
Okay. That's awesome. I want to get to your next chapter because the book is only one part, the speakeasy and some of these other things that you're doing. Can you tell me a little bit about what I would experience if I attended one of your speakeasies and what your mission is?
So my mission was to run away from my daughter. Anyone out there that's had a teenage girl knows that every now and then it's like living with Beelzebub. It's just a devil with a skirt on. And it was coming up to my birthday, and me and her, we were not getting on. And I didn't want to be there while she gave me the birthday card going, "Happy birthday, Dad." I didn't want that environment. So I literally just went on Facebook. And again, I've often, and my wife's often said that, I've never overthought anything in my life. I think that's a compliment, but I'm not sure. But I went onto Facebook, and this is how it started. And I went, right, 2 days, and I was heading down to San Diego. 2 days, San Diego, $2,000, share time with me. And that was it. And I put a little PayPal link in there. And that was it. No page, no website, just on Facebook. And I think, maybe about 8 people sign up. And I thought, what the hell are you signing up for? It's in San Diego. It's these 2 days. But you don't know where it's going to be, who's going to be there. And so I phoned up one of my mates. And I said to him, I saw you just spend $2,000 to spend 2 days with me. And I said to him, what's your problem? Meaning, are you nuts? But we hear what we want to hear. And when I said to him, what's your problem? He actually thought I was asking. So he went, great question, Steve. I'm stuck in this and I'm trying to do this. And he told me about a problem he was having within his business. So then I went through the other 7 people and I said to him, hey, can you tell me what is your problem that you would love to see solved at 2 days with me? And people were like, well, where's it going to be? I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you because I didn't know, And so at the end, one of them turned around and they went, this is great, Steve. This is just like a speakeasy. You don't know where it's going to be, but that's where the magic's going to happen. So literally from those phone calls, it became the speakeasy. And then I looked at the events we go to. And me and you, we've been to a countless events. And of course, I speak at thousands of events. And every event you go to, you know where it's going to be. You know what dates it's going to be. You know it starts at 9. You know who's coming on at 10, 11. You know what time the break is, the lunch. And there's a cocktail reception in the evening. You know everything. And you have to look at it and go, okay, right, do I want to go there? Now, how many times have you gone along to an event? Because this very, very famous person's going to be there, but that person hasn't been the most impactful to the event.
Right.
It's been the conversations you've had outside, or it's been this guy that you'd never heard of before that starts telling you about a story in the Vatican. You're like, fucking, I didn't even know who that guy was. So what I did was I flipped it. I came up with the idea of a reverse mastermind. We still call it a speakeasy. We still charge $2,000. You can go to simspeakeasy.com, and I want you to try this with your people. And I literally just go where it's going to be, city, not the location, the date, and the price. And then we contact them and we go, what problem would you like to see solved when you leave the speakeasy? So we get people saying, oh, I want to understand about NFTs. Should I use them in my business? I want to know about scaling. I want to be able to sell my business. How do I automate it? How do I disrupt my industry? In fact, one of the questions that we got, and then with all those questions, by the way, I'll go into my Rolodex and find out who I can bring in that's kind of special.
The who for the how. The who for the how. That's
bingo.
it.
So I had someone ask me, I forget what industry, this is bad, but one of the attendees, and it became a theme, and they're never more than 50 people, never. And one of the themes that kept coming up was how to stand out in your industry, and then another twist on that was how to disrupt your industry, and so I got Candace Nielsen to come in. And have you ever heard of Candace Nielsen?
I know the name, but I don't know why I know the name. So no, the answer.
All right. So you don't know who she is. So if I'd have actually said, hey, Candace Nielsen's coming in to answer that problem, people would have scratched their ass and gone, who the bloody hell is Candace Nielsen? Have you ever heard of Sprinkles Cupcakes?
Yes.
She's the founder.
Got it.
She entered an industry that was famous for shitty little dry cakes and disrupted it. And she disrupted it by making these cakes aspirational gifts. You would look good if you turned up at a dinner party and you had 6 Sprinkles cupcakes. You were actually revered at that dinner party because you'd bought these. She disrupted the cupcake industry. So she went through how to do this, how she disrupted it, and how you can look at the barriers within your industry and what you need to break through to actually stand up and loud. So we get people to come in that are not in your industry that actually show you how to do it. And we had Barbara Lazaroff was there, who's Wolfgang Puck's wife, on the whole branding of Wolfgang Puck and how to keep the continuity, how to keep the standards. And we know a lot of brands. Look at, Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren. As soon as they start, and Calvin Klein, as soon as they started getting sold in Macy's,
It's
that
not cool.
appeal, it's not cool. So there's a lot of times where you make more money, but you've got to look at the brand integrity. So there are some deals to avoid because not how much money you will make, but how much will it cost you?
Right.
You don't go out, if you want to go out for the evening, you don't go to Tommy Hilfiger to pick up an outfit to go out that night because, hey, that ain't top shelf. You go to Macy's for that. Sorry, Tommy, but that's a fact. So we had these people come in to actually answer it. So the speakeasies, the city, the date, it's always $2,000, but you never know who's going to be there. But once I've got hold of your problem, 2 things are going to happen. 1, I'm going to make a decision whether or not you're a cool kid that I want to play with for 2 days. If you're an arsewipe, if I find you've got too much ego, you get a refund and you don't come. But if I find I like the conversation, I like the curiosity, I like the aggravation, I think you would fit in the room, then I'll bring you in and I'll get someone to answer your problems.
That's great. There's a couple things that you said that I think are really worth pointing out. Number 1, when I go to one of these events or when we go to one of these events and we know everything, we immediately start to disqualify. You mentioned this, but you immediately start to say, I don't want to see that person. Year number 1 at Genius Network, I went to everything. I didn't miss a single word. I stayed up late every night. I picked the brains of everybody. I had a blast. Last one I went to, I go to the bathroom a little bit more. I hang out front a little bit more. I talk to my friends a little bit more. You start to get comfortable. And when you get comfortable in a room, you're not really able to maybe expand at the level that you could. And you mentioned that. Number 2 was outer industry. I love the fact that I find my best ideas from people that have nothing to do with what I do and how I do it. You want to disrupt your industry? Find out how other people in other industries have done it because they've been doing it in a particular way really, really well for a long time. And that might apply in ours, right? And so I felt like that's crucial. And number 3, exclusivity. you qualify, and you know when someone's an asshole. When you do what you've done, you know, you've dealt with some of the biggest names and the biggest producers, and like you said in the beginning, you like to find the people that are the people that are that own countries, not just the people that live in them in high-priced houses. You're looking for the people that really are making a difference. And I love that too. So the Speakeasy is something people should check out because it sounds badass. It sounds like you're going to have some time. And I don't know if you feel like this, but I always feel like sometimes when I step away at these events, I have a moment to think for myself, silence in my own space. Like I almost have to get away to think about some of the things that I could be doing at right here. But when you're away, you kind of have this filter and this focus that's a little different. Do you find that to be the case, or do you do that better at home?
So I always give people direct instructions when they leave a speakeasy. Okay. And the direct order is that they do nothing for 3 days. And that's one of, because you're busy making these notes and you're making all these connections and everything's going through and all your endorphins are going and your head's going crazy and you're clapping around like a demented sea lion. And then the lights go on and you go home. Okay. And that's when these things have to line up properly. So I always tell people, do nothing. Let it percolate, let it saturate, and then bring it up. So don't do anything for 3 days. Don't contact me. Don't text me. Don't email. Don't do that to anybody in here. I am telling you now, no one is to communicate with anyone in here for another 3 to 5 days. And it's one of my orders in there because you're right. You do need that stuff to digest. And you need to know, how's it going to sit? Now, the funny thing is, as entrepreneurs, we're dysfunctional. You know, we're all creative disruptors and we all think we can do everything. And the easiest way to make an entrepreneur go bankrupt is to go, hey, I bet you can't do this for $10. You know full well that the entrepreneur will go, yeah, I can. You'll forget the monetary gain. Have you ever heard of a guy called Burt Rutan?
No.
So Burt Rutan is the guy that won the X Prize from Peter Diamandis. The X Prize was when they put up $10 million if you could put a rocket in space, bring it down, refuel it, and send it back up again. All right. If you could do that twice, you got $10 million. Okay. Burt Rutan was the guy that did it with Scale Composites, and he then sold the plane to Galactic, which is now Virgin Richard Branson. All right. But Burt Rutan often said, and I was with him over at the spaceport, he said, you know, I spent $120 million to win 10. You know, that's the way the entrepreneur is. So as an entrepreneur, I also teach them the now, and not me line. Because you see, we don't want to let something go. This could be the best opportunity of our life. I'm very busy at the moment, but oh my God, I can't let it go. So if you put the stuff that, hey, this makes sense, let's do it now. And hey, I don't want to let that go. So you're not saying no, because entrepreneurs don't like to say no to things. If we put it in the not now, it's a way of just kind of like harnessing. We're not saying no, right? Just not at this moment in time. And then if it's a really good thing, but maybe you're inadequate to do it based on time, you know, you're able, whatever, get someone else to do it. Outsource it. Find a JV. Many of my really good deals have been where I've got hold of an opportunity and gone, this is a great opportunity, but I can't do everything in it. I'm going to find someone that can, and I'm going to take a 15% top slice. And I've had nothing to do with it, but I'm now getting 15% recurring. So that falls in the not me category. So there's a lot of different tactics. I also, in the Speakeasy, one of the things that I do is I have them write themselves a 3-month letter. And I have them write themselves a letter. And I got this from Ryan Dice and Roland Frazier. At the event, I have them write themselves a letter to themselves going, hey, Steve, glad to speak with you again. It was fun to get to hang with you 3 months ago. I literally make them have some fun with it. All right. I just wanted to check, did you implement this? did you actually get involved with this? And you mentioned these were the 3 things you wanted to do. How are you doing with those? Would love to hear back. And you literally write a third-party letter from you to you that we're because the last one we did was in Hollywood, and then the next one's in February in Dallas. And so I think in January, I'll post them to them. So in January, they'll get that 3-month letter and go, shit, I didn't do it.
I didn't do any of it. Right.
Yeah. So, or it'd be a case of, yeah, I did all of it plus more. So it's always really interesting to be able to do those.
That's awesome. What a cool idea. And really, you're also creating a escape when you're having those moments with your teenage daughter as well. So there's nothing wrong with those things. Your best ideas come from sometimes just trying to escape for small moments. I understand.
Yeah. We all plan for perfection, but we discover it when mistakes happen. Look at Coca-Cola. So there's a lot of real beauty and diamonds when things go a bit wrong.
Yeah. Failure is something that is a crucial ingredient to any level of success. Tell me how you embraced failure along this journey in whatever you're doing, and what somebody should be thinking. If they're thinking big, how does failure fit into that equation?
So for a start, here's the arrogance. Never failed at anything in my life. I've just become educated on what didn't work. And here's the role that it plays. You, as an entrepreneur, you should get this mantra on a coffee cup, tattooed on the inside of your eyelids, whatever. But it should say the first time you try anything, it will be shit. Okay? You can't come out of the gate with perfection. And as Ari Meisel always says, get going, then get good. So I try a lot of things and I make mistakes and I fail at it. And I go, oh, great, I failed at something. And then I try it again and it works. That failure now becomes education. By trying it again, it now becomes experience. By it now working a second and a third time, I now have understood how it works. So I'm now credible. So you go failure, education, experience, credibility. And when you're credible, you can invoice for that. And I've always believed that a failure is there to refine you, not define you. And I was in a party in London, very famous entrepreneur that I won't mention. And we were going up in the lift and we got to this penthouse, lift opened, doors open, and we walked out. And whenever you walk into a room, the playground never changes. It's like when you walk into a new gym, everyone checks you out. You walk into a biker bar, everyone gives you a side glance. You walk into an entrepreneur's event, everyone's like, it's all different playgrounds, but it's always playgrounds. And so I walked into this penthouse for this entrepreneur, and everyone kind of looks over, and he kind of like rears up and kind of looks around a bit, and he says to me, excellent, room full of failures. And I went, shit, that's not very nice. And he looked at me and he went, oh, hang on a minute, you read that wrong. And I went, I didn't read anything, man. I just heard what the fuck you said. I don't think that's right. And he went, no, you don't get it. He said, every single person in here has harnessed our failures to allow it to refine them, not define them. And then many years ago, I was at one of the early rocket launches for SpaceX. And do you remember seeing those rockets actually try and land on the floating platform?
Yeah.
And it would fall over and it would explode like a Hollywood movie. Now, everyone watching it on screen would go, oh, shit. But all the technicians and the scientists and Elon, they lent in. Now, it had gone from out of space into our gravitational field. It had come with the speed of the rocket going one way, the planet going the other way. It had landed on like a square foot platform. The fact that it even landed on there is quite a miracle. So they knew that this was a success. Oh, that little bit didn't work. We can ignore the rest because that worked. How do we refine that? Now, at the time, everyone was going, oh my God, he's just lost another $1 billion, blah, 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 blah. When was the last time you saw it tip over and crash? You don't. Why? because he leant into the problem, got educated, refined it. And he's always sending rockets up there now, but you don't see it landing on the floating platform anymore because it works. That failure got refined into education and experience, and now he's credible. He knows how to do it.
That's awesome. Isn't it funny how when you start something new, there's this lack of self-awareness sometimes where you're like, why am I not great at this? I remember the first time I went golfing and I was miserable. I'm still miserable at golfing, but I was more miserable then. And I remember coming in and everybody telling everyone in the group that I was with that I was a horrible golfer. And I said, guys, I don't understand how this works. It's the first time I've ever gone golfing. How can I be horrible as a golfer? I'm not even a golfer. You don't go out and shoot a basketball and me define you as a basketball player. You're just a guy who shot a basketball. Can we just lay it out as it is? I am a guy who's never played golf. And today I tried it. And tomorrow I'll be a little bit better. And so it is. I took my niece driving this past weekend. She's 16 and very timid. And we got in the car and she's like, I'm just not good at this. And I said, well, you're not supposed to be, because today is one of the first times you've ever driven. So it's all right. We're going to go on the interstate. I can't go on the interstate. I said, the interstate's just another driving experience. You could handle it. And it's just, you build that confidence through the habit, through the failures along the way. It's so important. I love that with Elon Musk. And I think you mentioned this in your book, but I love the analogy where everybody loved to laugh at Elon with the Cybertruck. You know, they had been beating the hell out of that truck like all day, and that cannonball or whatever it is goes through the side and it cracks, and everyone's like, oh, he's such an idiot. He's a loser. Look at him. And, you know, today they read all of his tweets. So, I mean, I guess he's doing all right. He continues to
As a society, we love to laugh at people. We didn't revere the guy for actually building something just monumentally different. We love the fact that we found something that went wrong that we could actually jeer at him. It's wrong that the media released it. And it's wrong that as humanity, we harness it. And I always thought right at the beginning of COVID, the problem was media. Media is a distribution outlet. You don't have to watch it. You don't have to listen to it. But it's just got more. There's more distribution today than there's ever been. But we had those problems in the past. You know, Henry Ford had people protesting against him. Edison, they actually said the light bulb was dangerous. You know, all of these people were protested for crazy ideas. Coffee, they tried banning coffee for its hallucinogenic properties. So I went back in time to realize the problem isn't with the media. The problem is with our society. Us as human beings would much rather point, jeer, and laugh than we would support and challenge. And that needs to change.
Yeah. You know, if you go back to the word we talked about earlier, a little bit of curiosity comes without judgment. Curiosity comes with an open mind to understand where something might be coming from, where someone might be coming from. And when you're looking at media usually is coming from a spot where they are reporting and they're giving you that stuff. But if it, you know, the negative news sells way more than the positive stuff. Failure always sells. And that also keeps us thinking a little bit small. So, you know, if everybody thinks big, I always tell my boys this. I'm like, guys, people will often say, I can't believe that people would raise children today. Why would anyone have kids in this world? And I always think, man, the world gets easier and better every year, because if you stand out, it gets easier and easier to stand out amongst sheep. When everybody wants to be and do the same thing, if I go in as the only bald guy, and I couldn't do that with you in the room. So if I walk in as the only bald guy in the room, you know, I have a unique ability, something nobody else has. I stand out in a way and I own it. And I love that. And I teach them that. And hopefully these are things that all help everybody think a little bit bigger. But, you know, any parting thoughts, any parting ideas, anything that you're working on that everybody should know? What do we want to tell everybody before we end this interview?
To dare to be different. I don't want to gain other than the society that I will gain from. I want people to just go, hang on a minute, if he can do it, I can do it. I want them to have stupid goals, stupid aspirations. I don't give a shit if you buy the book. I care that you think bigger and do bigger. So that's my focus.
I love it. How do they find Steve Sims? Steve, you're doing big things. How do they find you?
I'm very easy to find. I'm easier to get than COVID. I'm Steve D. Sims, absolutely everywhere. SteveDSims.com. Don't forget the D for dashing, 1M in Sims. SteveDSims.com, Instagram, Twitter, absolutely anywhere. Or go to the website Go for Stupid for the actual book itself.
The book is phenomenal. Honestly, it's great on so many levels. And yep, I have mine right here. I actually, when I love a book, I actually highlight in it and study it. And it was really, really good. It's the kind of book that you want any entrepreneur to utilize, anybody that wants to be bigger, do bigger things, and maybe make just a bigger difference. Sometimes it can be applied towards things like impact. And if you're doing things, I think you've been making impact in people's lives for a long time. I'm very honored and grateful to have you on the show. I look forward to having an old fashioned with you in the future. And thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.